Right. So good afternoon, everybody. Or evening, right? So as I was saying, the objective of this session today, we are going to sort of do the theory on the risk assessment today without really looking at the risk assessment. But I'll give you an overview then of what the risk assessment should look like, right? So we have here the objective of the session. It's a facilitated meeting towards the following themes: the legal requirement for doing a risk assessment, the aims and objectives of risk assessments, identifying hazards, who are risk assessors, what is the criteria for suitable and sufficient risk assessment. We mightn't get to all of this today, but we'll get to some of it, right? I don't think we'll get to the last one, but we'll get to the main parts of the risk assessment and an overview of the area. Now, for those who are already subscribed to the YouTube channel, remember you can get the whole lesson, like the risk assessment project itself is 4 parts. You can actually get part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. There are numerous recordings already available on YouTube. So you don't have to wait for next week then. Today's the overview, but you don't have to wait for next week. You can actually just move along with it once you have what I'll give you and what I had emailed you already. But and again, once you know how to use it as well, you can just move on anyway, right? Perhaps before we start, one word of encouragement here, which is, I think it's still worth it anyway. I think it still is worth it, right? You know, Today I was looking at, well, it came up on my sort of email. Massey, has a vacancy, HSC advisor. You can check it out for yourself, right? So I just scrolling down. This is live, this isn't save or anything, right? And when you look down here, you see here, you know, of course they want a degree. Massey is like that anyway. But they are looking here for what you all are doing, which is the main qualification itself, right? NEBOSH, National, General Certificate slash Diploma, right? So it's good to see it. As always, it's good to see that we are on the right path, right? And that we are not, we are not fooling anybody, right? Marcy and I have not had any formal discussions in more than 5 or 7 years now, anyway. And to see that the companies are still asking for it in the region is, of course, very good anyway, right? Let's get into the first one, legal requirements. So this will go kind of fast. We will actually finish the bulk of this by about 3:45 or just after 3:30. Um, I would decide if I want to look at suitable and sufficient, because once you finish like this part here, you could actually bridge into the project. So I'll decide if I want to bridge into the project or cover suitable and sufficient, which is just another
Exclusive.
theory. Uh-huh.
Um, quick, I didn't notice if you post up the last week class.
I probably didn't. Did you all, where do you all normally get it, on YouTube?
Yeah.
I probably didn't, right? I am actually that busy, but like what I've been telling all my classes, let's not rely too much on the videos anymore. Now, that was for the pandemic where people couldn't come out and stuff like that, right? You all could access me anytime. Um, at the same time, too, for those who know me, I don't believe in sharing everything to YouTube, right? I don't believe the lessons should be all consecutive on YouTube, because I think that's robbing me of my livelihood, right? And so if I forgot that one, I first of all do apologize, but at the same time, I don't believe in putting the whole course on YouTube. So we kind of stagger them, right? So you do have your PowerPoints. People learn from them all the time. That's how we live and breathe before the pandemic, right? I actually, like I said, don't believe in having, because if that's the case, then I'm selling myself on YouTube for free, right? So I'll take a note of it and I'll put it for you. But just remember what I said. I don't believe in the whole course should have been on YouTube. And I think I've always said that to you all. At the same time, bear with me a bit. The Google Classroom seem to be giving some problems, right? I'm not too sure what the problem is. Recently, I'm seeing it saying server error or something. So I didn't know something on YouTube itself, or It couldn't be my internet. It started to happen this week, right? So I'll try to put them on YouTube for you all. There's another
Mr.
means, but
Sarah?
let me
Yeah.
finish this, right?
Oh,
There's
sorry.
another yeah, there's another means I could use, which is something called WeTransfer. It's like it's meant to send videos, but WeTransfer does only allow me to send 5 at a time, and you all know what my day is like now, right? So if I don't decide to put all on YouTube, which is what my intention will later on in life, as I said, this is my bread and butter. Later on in life, I would probably put them on Patreon or something where people can pay for them or set them up in a way where the videos I'm talking about where people have to pay to access them, right? So the YouTube was meant just to kind of gather that sort of views and that sort of publicity, but it was never meant to show. And as if you look at the videos, all of them, but you all have had them consistent, right? And but that was never the intent to have them in a consistent way, right? If if I do end up with more time, and the only way I'm going to end up with more time is if I wake later in the night, I could send them through WeTransfer, right? WeTransfer is a facility that will send videos, but like I said, it's limited to 5 persons at a time, meaning I have to walk down the videos 5 persons at a time from your class registers, right? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the point I was going to raise is that usually you would send a link in the chat. So I was
Oh,
wondering if, yeah, so that I don't know if that's what the
the truth is,
individual was talking about.
the
I don't
truth
think
is,
I haven't accessed it on YouTube, but
I
through the
don't
chat,
even know if
through WhatsApp.
I don't even know if the video has been posted, right? I just post them a lot at a time. Like if you go now, you'd see oil and gas. So you have to, yes, I sometimes don't post them on the chat, but I'm seeing it doesn't look as if it's posted. So I would have to look into it, right? I'm seeing November, but I see November from like another sitting. Um, right? I'm seeing November, but I don't think it's your November. At the same time, too, like today class, right? Like you could actually just go to YouTube and find a similar recording, like Project Part 1, and you'll see the same lesson. So, like I said, like the video library now is about 1,000 videos. I have some long-term plans with them. But I do understand too, the pandemic has kind of wean us off textbooks and notes now. But at the same time, I still feel that's a way to learn. I would of course try to upload the video, but I still don't like the whole, free content being there anyway where anybody could access it, right? I think as I said, not think, I know in years to come I would probably streamline them in a way, some sort of paid facility, right? This is what I do for a living, right? This on consultancy. So like how somebody would sell in the market, this is what I do for a living on a Saturday, right? So I can't give everything out for free in that sense. I would advise if that is, for now or for today, then kind of use the notes a bit, right? The notes are very good. I believe you all have textbooks, kind of use the books a bit until we can kind of sort out maybe what I can put up there on the YouTube channel anyway, right? At the same time, bear in mind, you have recordings already on YouTube that covers the same content. Mightn't be your faces, but it still is me and it still is the same content in a way then anyway, right? So let's kind of, there's just a different technique. There are many teaching techniques available in the world. One of them is actually using, books and slides. One of them is videos and stuff. But let's not forget then that we could learn by opening the book. We could learn by reading the PowerPoint, right? And it's just one other technique used there for teaching as well, right? Yeah. All right. With that said, let me make a start. So as I was saying, remember it's open book exam. They don't really ask too much of knowledge-based stuff. So here we have the law that says to do a risk assessment. Like nobody would really ask you this, and if they ask you, they open the slides and you can get it. I would say it, of course, is Regulations 3 of the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulation 1999 that says the company or the employer must do what is called a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. Definitely, I don't see that as a question, right? It is also implied in Section 2.3 of the HSW Act 1974 that the company should do a risk assessment. Coming back to lesson 1, we had, and this is also recorded, but again, folks, human beings learn differently, right? So don't over rely on books and don't over rely on videos, but mix it up a bit, right? It still is about repetition. The only way we kind of learn is by repetition. So it's either you read it out or you listen to it, but it's still a teaching way then, right? So what is a hazard? We covered this in one of our first classes, the potential to cause harm. Hazards can include articles, substances, plant or machine, method of working, the working environment, and other aspects of work organization. No need to learn that. It's an open book thing, right? Risk is the likelihood of harm occurring and the severity. Risk is the likelihood of potential harm from the hazard being realized, and risk is normally calculated. You could use that formula there, likelihood by severity. I have some worked out, so bear with me a bit, you'll see it. A risk assessment is the process of identifying preventative and protective measures by evaluating the risk arising from a hazard, taking into account the adequacy of any existing controls, and deciding whether or not the risk is acceptable. Kind of long, but again, nobody will ask that, right? What is the objective of a risk assessment? You know what I realized Nibosh was doing? Nibosh was looking at my videos, and what I say in that comment, they was bringing it. But it didn't seem like they look at that in a long time. When I say a long time, this last exam here, we had an exam last week, Wednesday. It didn't seem like if they were doing that anymore, right? Like they don't really ask knowledge-based questions anyway. So there's no way for them to ask you, define a risk assessment. That's not a question in the open book exam. So that would never come, right? The objectives of doing a risk assessment to determine the measures required by the organization to comply with relevant health and safety legislation, such as the Management of Health and Safety Drug Regulation 1999, right? What is the objective of a risk assessment? To ensure the risk is not too high, ensure it's acceptable, to fulfill a moral duty of care to employees, to prevent workplace accidents, to reduce the direct and indirect costs associated with an accident. Now, this is what I said we wanted to come back to, because this is a kind of odd concept. It doesn't follow the rest of slides, but the explanation is not hard. So if you want, I'll just do the explanation one time. Remember, you're not really going to get these things here. The explanation is not hard, right? So if you want, I'll do it one time. So what is a suitable and sufficient risk assessment? If you look back at the law, including the OSH Act of Trinidad and Guyana, the law never really said do a risk assessment. Let's read it carefully. The law didn't say do a risk assessment. Regulations 3 of the Management of Health and Safety Work Risk Regulation 1999 requires what is called a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. So it never really said do a risk assessment. It said do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. But then what's the difference? Or is there a difference between a risk assessment and a suitable and sufficient risk assessment? And the answer is yes, right? So listen to the explanation, because you could always come back and read that and use those points, right? So a suitable and sufficient risk assessment, listen to it first, right? Tells you that you need to tailor your risk assessment to the needs of the people in your company. Hence the name, suitable and sufficient. I'll say it again. If you want, you could write it down. It's just an explanation thing, right? So when the law said do a risk assessment, it technically didn't say do a risk assessment. It said do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. So what's the difference? The difference is it's not a general risk assessment. Most companies do a general risk assessment, but the law never said that. The TT-OSH Act did not say that. The UK Act didn't say that. And the Act in Guyana didn't say it either, right? What it said was do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. What's the difference? The difference is that when you say you're doing a suitable risk assessment, it means you are tailoring the risk assessment now to the employees. You are catering for that employee that is pregnant. You are catering the risk assessment for Frank, who has a bad leg. You are catering the risk assessment for the trainee that you took in. She may not have been exposed to the chemicals in your company before. I'm just saying she, right? She is a young worker, right? The hardened workers, not hardened in terms of your behavior, but the worker that has been in an environment where there's oil and ammonia and gases, their body may have gotten accustomed to that. They may not come down with a case of rashes or itches or dermatitis. But this young worker, this young girl, she may, because this is the first time in your plant. This is the first time at New Iron. This is the first time at Atlantic LNG. This is the first time being exposed to those elements then, right? So the risk assessment would have to consider young persons. They could write on the slide, watch. New and expectant mothers, young persons, people who have disabilities. You don't have to be born with them. You could be. That's just life, right? But you could have a disability in that you could have been playing football, riding bicycle, driving. God forbid, I've known students that have gotten into accident, and your foot is now in a cast. For that 3 months, for that 4 months, or that 5 months, you are classed as differently able. You cannot run as fast as you could have run. And in case of an emergency, how are you going to get out of the building? Did the risk assessment consider that? Did the risk assessment consider that you are on the 3rd floor of the building? And if it didn't, well, then that is not a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. Tell me if you understand it. You understand it? Yeah? All right. So I hope you do. Because remember, like they don't ask you nothing too complicated like this. They will tell you, read the case study, and then they can say, comment on if the risk assessment was suitable and sufficient. That's all your question. I'm just making this up. As you read the case study, if it says there was a young apprentice who was exposed to a chemical and came down with dermatitis, actually I'm quoting a real case study there from Wednesday. Wednesday exam had that, right? And they say comment on if the risk assessment, but it's not suitable and sufficient. If you understand the concept, right, you can say, well, in my opinion, a risk assessment should have considered, watch it, all foreseeable risk. Here you come back to my notes now, right? However, in the case that was mentioned that the young worker had a heavy hand glove on, and when it was removed, the worker had dermatitis. You can say, therefore, that risk assessment was not suitable and sufficient because it should have covered the vulnerability then of the young worker. That's a good point to write down. Right? But in a way, then you're not really using these points. In a way, you're just looking at the case study and saying what you felt was not up to mark. So that's a good way to think about it, I guess, locally. Suitable and sufficient meant that you have done a good risk assessment to cater for Jane, who told you that, she produced a medical report saying that she's pregnant. So before you had the workers moving boxes, but did you really now cater it now for Jane? Because if you didn't, then that is not a suitable and sufficient risk assessment, right? I'll read out all of these. The level of detail should be proportionate to the risk, record all significant findings. The level of risk should determine the degree of sophistication. Employers or self-employed should use appropriate information sources to help them identify the risk. The risk assessment should be appropriate to the nature of the work and should identify the period of time for which it is to remain valid. Well, on the exam paper last week, I have it here, but I didn't plan to show you all it. Right? So I could just tell you now, right? Like on the paper on Wednesday, they said, no, they didn't ask them risk assessment, right? I have it open still, I just finished a class when you're logged on there. I was just trying to switch gears between that class and this one. It's supposed to be on the view screen here still. Let me see if I see it. If I don't see it, I don't see it, right? Because I've had to load up your projects then. And what happened? Zoom does only allow a certain amount of views at a time. So I'm seeing some stuff, right? I really don't need to find it to share, right? Just kind of moving with the lesson. I was hoping it was there, but did the top of it now have all this stuff for this class? Because I was kind of loading up the view screen when you all came in there, right? If we get some time, which I know we wouldn't get time, I'll open, but you could listen to what I'm telling you, right? So like the paper had on it, they had a worker asked to see company documents. and the company documents were locked in a cabinet. When they finally found the risk assessment, it was dated 5 years ago, right? However, on that paper, there was no risk assessment question. I'm just saying that's an example then of a risk assessment not being suitable and sufficient, because risk assessment should be updated every year. Think you understand? However, there was no risk assessment question on the paper on Wednesday, right? I'm just saying that is a perfect example of this, right? All right, getting back in the flow of it, so risk assessment, remember I tell you this slide is kind of misplaced because like we were talking about risk assessments before, then it kind of went to specify the type of risk assessment then, right? That's just how it is, right? That's how it is in terms of the content. So risk assessments can be qualitative, where you use words to describe the risk, high, medium, low. Risk assessments can be quantitative, in which they use like decimal points. We cover that at the degree level. And then we use the formula, which is called the semi-quantitative method, which is a mix of words and numbers. To be a risk assessor, you must be competent, skilled, experienced with both practical and theoretical knowledge. Normally, risk should be assessed as a team because you want to avoid subjectivity. If you remember the first lesson, we had I'd drawn a man on a scaffold, a stick figure, and I asked what was the likelihood of falling, what was the severity. Really and truly, the more people that chime in on that, the better, right? Who are part of the risk assessor team, HSE manager, supervisors, someone familiar with the work activities and location of work, safety representatives, a specialist, right? And I have one here, example, likelihood and severity. We can go up to 5, but sometimes they stop at 3. Likelihood 1, meaning low, 2, medium, 3, high. Severity, 1 means no harm, 2 means serious, 3 means major injury or death, right? Employers must make a suitable and sufficient risk assessment of the risk to health and safety. Self-employed persons must do the same thing. You must give employees the knowledge of the risk assessment. Employers should not employ a young person unless they have done a risk assessment. And once you employ more than 5 persons, you must do a risk assessment, right? The risk assessment should take into account the young persons, their inexperience, lack of awareness, the form of the substance that they exposed to, if it's a gas, a solid, a liquid. What are the processes in that organization, the extent of the health and safety training provided, right? Any risk to agents listed in this European Union Council directive. And this is more things like radiation and stuff, right? Radiation, biological agents and stuff is that. A risk assessment must be conducted where someone, is of childbearing age, an expected mother, a new mother. If someone did inform your company that, they have found out that they are going to have a baby, then the company must try to avoid work activities if the risk is high. They can try to reduce working hours if it is reasonable to do so. And if it's not reasonable to do so, the person should be given full pay. Most people don't do that when they work down to the end, though, right? So they should have said the work should be suspended and the person is to be given full pay, possibly placed on light duty, etc. Right? So read out these here because these are not exam questions. This is just knowledge, and we could focus back on something a little bit more examinable, right? So there is a method for doing risk assessments. It is referred to as the 5 steps for doing a risk assessment. It's a publication from the Health and Safety Executive known as INDG 163. Anybody remember what an INDG is? What does that look like? We had a whole class on that. What does an INDG document look like? Anyone? What does an INDG document look like? So you probably need to start studying, right? And I'll tell you all that, if you don't have, I don't see you having to listen to the whole hour and a half video. Just pick up the slides and read them, right? So anyone remember what an INDG document looks like? We had a whole class on that, folks.
A booklet?
It's a booklet.
That's
It's a book.
guidance.
It's a book. It's a guide. Yeah, it's a guide. But it's a book now. You could actually get it free of charge on the HSE website. Thanks very much for the answer. I almost got a heart attack there. So thanks very much, and you all actually know what it is, right? So there's actually a book. I have 2 copies somewhere in the office here. I don't even know where it is, to be honest, but I know I have 2 copies here, right? Again, I mean, just to let you know, before the pandemic and stuff, these things were not so accessible, but they are very much. HSC website is now free. You can just log on and download INDG 163. Anyway, let me get back to content, right? So the content here suggests that there is a method for doing a risk assessment then, right? And maybe, I say maybe here with a grain of salt, maybe if you don't know it and you want to stay in safety, maybe you should learn it. Because this is like an interview question. They'll ask you, how do you do a risk assessment? Right? It's not too hard. Well, some students years ago, more than a decade ago, right? They came up with an acronym to remember it, which is IDERR. And that's kind of pronounced idea. But because of the open book exam, there's really no need to memorize anything. But if you're going for an interview or something, that's a good question. Like, how do you do a risk assessment, right? So you could actually impress the interview panel by saying, okay, it's INDG 163. And if you memorize it, identify the hazard, decide who can be harmed and how, evaluate the risk, decide on your precautions, if you're adequate or not, record and review, right? So if you want, I want to show you something. I remember telling you something about bridging into the project, right? If you watch your project sheet, the one I had up before, let me go back to it. There's a part of your project, tell me if you're seeing it. It's kind of yellow, it have a yellow border on it. You all seen it? Okay, so if you get to part 2 of this, when you watch this a bit, right? You notice like the headings of the RE. You notice the headings is like the steps. Watch this. The first step was identify the hazard. The second step was to say who could be harmed and how. Third step is what you're already doing. It's kind of like that then, record and review, right? Well, the sheet itself is a record and the review date is actually here, but it's actually in part 4. There are 4 parts of the project, right? So I'll say that again. If you don't know the steps are a risk assessment, and yes, and you want to stay in safety, maybe you should try to remember it by heart. In a way, that's what safety people do. Like we do risk assessments on a regular basis, right? And the headings there kind of reflect the headings on the table. NIBOSH kind of tailor it a bit because it was NIBOSH, right? But the headings kind of reflect the headings on the table anyway. Let me go back to this slide. All right. So moving on. So what the rest of the slides have in it is really not examinable. What the rest of the slides have in it is like, how do we identify hazards? Who are the people that can be harmed? How do you evaluate risk? What do you record? When do you review? But we'll still run through it, right? So how do you identify hazards? The list is endless. You can take an inspection. You can take a tour. You could look at past accident data. You could look at all risk assessments. You could look at job safety analysis. You could look at permit to work and stuff like that, right? How do you identify hazards? You could look at data from MSDS sheets, complaints from employees, results from auditing, results from health surveillance, results from tests such as past dust or gas sampling. You can look at absence records, linked to days away from work due to poor working condition. You could look at trade union actions and see why were they protesting, right? That's not really example, just me giving you different ways to identify hazards, right? Who are the people that could be harmed at work? Everybody. Employees, operators, maintenance staff, cleaners, members of the public, visitors, contractors, people who have the right of entry into your compound, police, customs, HSC, environmental health officers, trespassers, young persons, disabled persons, new or expectant mothers, right? How do you evaluate the risk? We just mentioned there was a way using words, there's a way using the formula, and there's a way just using direct numbers. The formula way is this way. You take the numbers from 1 to 5 for likelihood, and you multiply it, likelihood on this side. You multiply by numbers 1 to 5 for severity. The higher numbers you get end up being red, red is seen, well, representative of red then, right? Is seen to be high risk. The middle numbers are representative of like a traffic light system, yellow, which is said to be medium risk, and the lower numbers are said to be like green, and the traffic light is good, right? So green is good to go there. There's nothing more you can do. You could monitor. You could monitor something if it's kind of high still. 1/5 is 5, right? But there's no need to do anything. Those lower numbers are seen to be acceptable, right? Evaluating the risk to decide if precautions are adequate or not. Well, I can break this down for you. Normally, when you do a risk assessment, you want to put more controls in place. So if the controls are sufficient, then controls must be introduced, and not sufficient, sorry, then controls must be introduced to reduce the risk to safe and acceptable levels. You could probably use the hierarchy of control if you all know what that is. The hierarchy that talks about elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE in suggesting your controls, right? The risk that remains after you put the controls in place is called residual risk. You kind of have to understand too that there'll always be residual risk, right? Only if you understand that, there'll always be residual risk. There's no way to get risk to zero there. Anybody could say, why would there be no way to get risk to zero? What was the number we start counting from? The number we start counting from is?
1.
1.
1.
And then 1 by 1 is 1. So 1 by 1 is not 0, right? Something I was looking at yesterday, I think it came up on YouTube or something. I normally have the TV just on. Was some motivational speaker, right? And they were saying like everything in life is risk, right? And yeah, I mean, and like I guess in a way, I mean, that was a motivational talk, right? So like you all being here is a risk. When I say being here is a risk, it's like, you're risking your money, you're risking your time, right? But that's life, like life is risk. The only way, I guess, to be out of risk, right? And I guess the motivational speaker was trying to tell people, to kind of take a chance, maybe if you're looking at, and those who are telling you this, I just telling you what was here, right? Like, like studying something new, taking up a new hobby, right? Anything that of course, hopefully it's done in a safe way, and that's the purpose of safety, that you could actually learn something that in a safe way now, right? I mean, you all are home and that's kind of safe anyway, right? So life is full of risk, and like if you just sail through though, if you just sail through life, a lot of people do that. I kind of have realized that, right? Like if you just sail through life, you probably would have a good life, right? Like if a lot of people have different circumstances, like maybe you're set in life and whatever have you, right? But if you never try something new, you never try a new job, you never try your hand at a business, something like that, then yes, it would have risky parts of it, right? But I guess the old saying is true, it's better you fail than to say, I could have done that, right? I'm just making up this, right? I could have gone rock climbing, or I could have learned to ride a bicycle, or I could have learned to skateboard, right? Or I could have done this, or I could have done that, right? Life goes by very fast, right? Life goes by very fast. Some people say with the lash of a whip, right? Just like that, and life goes by. So, I suppose in that sense, study, do whatever you have to do. This is 2025, soon to be 2026, as was 2024 anyway, right? So that's just life, right? And the strange part about this is that nobody then is getting out of life free. We all have to die. Nobody's leaving here without dying. You ever thought about that? Nobody's leaving Earth without dying, right? So what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of by putting your best foot forward in this course, getting a good job, what are you afraid of, right? So, and in that sense, then I was saying that risk is not just unique to safety, but of course, do it in a wise way, right? That you have some control, because if you look at the heading, this is all about deciding on if the controls are adequate or not, right? So if you're looking at getting into some sort of new sport or whatever it is, right? Purchasing a car, if you think it's risky, just make sure you have the controls in place, think about it sensibly, pray. And that's just life, right? It would never be that everything in life. And if you live a life that is always low risk, you're probably just settling for, not pushing yourself enough then, right? And I think that's a lesson we can learn here personally out of the risk formula anyway, right? Anyway, yeah, I was saying, so life always have risk with it. There's no way to get zero risk unless if you are dead. And I have a simple one here, than getting back to normal safety, right? So the risk of using an electric kettle, of it overheating, I've just made this up. Likelihood is 5, severity is 4, 5 by 4 is 20, 20 is kind of high. So that's unacceptable. So you put controls in place. When you put controls in place, the risk will go down from the likelihood of the kettle overheating, because we did proper maintenance, frequent inspection. PAT is something in England. PAT is not a person. PAT is a scheme. PAT, I mean, like you don't have to write it down. I'm just telling you, right? PAT is something called portable appliance tested. That's PAT. PAT is not a person, right? So like all portable, like how we have here, like an electric kettle, should have been tested. So if the kettle would have been regularly tested, it should never be overheated, right? At least unless it is a freak, of a freak event anyway, right? So with those controls in place, we want to believe the risk will go down. From 5, it goes down. The likelihood is 2. The consequences again may go down based on your controls. 3. This is just an example anyway. 5 by 4 is 20. From 20, it came down to 6. In other words, then from the red areas, it came down to a lower risk area, right? And it mightn't be perfect, but it still is out of the red. And if you're out of the red, life could go on, work could go on, sport and activities could go on. I think that's the last slide, right? Oh, I have another one here. I will just leave this one. So you'd actually see this one in terms of the tabular format. And then when do you review a risk assessment? This is a good slide. Risk assessments, I had mentioned in the past, should be reviewed every year when there are changes to people, places, processes, after an accident, maybe after you do health surveillance records and it was found out that your workers are still coughing, the area is still dusty. Your risk assessment didn't pick up on that, but maybe you should go back and review the risk assessment, right? The result of hygiene monitoring. COSH is a law in England. Again, I don't know if you want to write down what it stands for. You don't have to. You could just Google it, right? COSH stands for the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health. The last amendment, I think, is 2006. But COSH, you can get COSH documents from 2004. Control of Substances Hazardous to Health, right? So if you do noise monitoring, you do COSH, by the way, is for chemicals, right? Control of Substances Hazardous to Health. Could include things like asbestos, could include things like carcinogens. If you found those things, then maybe you need to put it in your risk assessment. Maybe the severity number will jump up. So that probably been 4, maybe it'll be 5, right? If there's a change in legislation or you introduce a new law, but not you, the government introduce a new law, you're going to have to review your risk assessments, right? Further reasons for review: process change has taken place, an incident has occurred that may highlight a point of weakness in the present assessment. Special cases occurred, such as the hiring of young persons. Maybe you took on some apprentices. There is a expectant or a nursing mom. So you need to review the risk assessment, right? The job has gone from 2 workers to 1 worker. A disability has occurred, but Frank is still working. So you need to consider that now. He's not quick on his foot anymore. We need to get him out from 3rd floor to the bottom floor. We need to set up his office downstairs or let him work downstairs. Let him sit next to somebody who is working downstairs, right? So all of those are reasons for viewing the risk assessment, right? The last thing here, I think there's an ACOP in the UK that says adverse events such as accidents, ill health, or dangerous occurrences may take place even if you do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment, because it's not a guarantee, right? It's not a guarantee of your safety. You think I agree to that? A safety officer, then you can never do a risk assessment. Like, you are not God then, in a way, right? Like, you cannot do a risk assessment and say, okay, well, the risk is 2 by 3, 6, and nothing will happen. This electric kettle will never catch a fire, will never overheat. Things could still happen, right? They could have had low voltage, they could have had high voltage that, kind of cause that event anyway, right? So the last thing here is like a disclaimer. The HSE is saying that adverse events may still happen, even if you do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. In a way, then, what have to happen will happen. That's just life, right? As a safety, though, you do have to take all your initiative to prevent the accident. I don't remember an accident. This week, I wouldn't call the company name, right? But a big company, the biggest one, in fact, they were cutting chicken. I don't know if you figure out the company. I don't know if you all ever seen them do it, right? These people, have you all ever seen somebody cut chicken on a bandsaw? You ever see how they do it? Man, is the fastest thing. I would, hopefully not in this life, right? These people would take the chicken and just put it at the bandsaw is running there, and they would just put it and they get all the parts. They just cut it that fast. Sometimes they're looking away, they're talking on their phone. And this week, a lady leaned into one of the bandsaw, right? Those bandsaws are very sharp. Like I said, they cut the pieces of chicken to specification like that. Chicken is bone as well, right? Yeah, she leaned into the bandsaw. She didn't die. She survived, right? I'll leave it right there. But now, what I say now, and so OSHA, I know the company very good. I know the safety in the company very good, right? So OSHA called and asked to see all the documents, and he have all the documents. He have all the JSAs, all the risk assessment, all the method of working, and that doesn't guarantee that somebody would not lean into a bandsaw. Think you understand that? Life happens sometimes then, right? And we don't say anything. I mean, in the sake of safety, that all we are required to have is we are required to have those documents to say, look, we have the RE, we have done the risk assessment, the machine is maintained, it had a guard, the guard was functioning, right? So we have a safe method of work. The lady should not have leaned into the machine, but she did, right? And that's just how it is anyway, right? All right. So I would not read these here because what happened, NIBOSH have their own, like the book list is different to the NIBOSH list, right? There is a list of hazards in the book: chemical, physical, biological, psychological. I should not have even read it. Because if I read it, people get mixed up with it, right? So you all just gonna stop the slide right here, right? So for your project, if you want, we're gonna bridge into the project now. For your project, NIBOSH give you a list. So there's a list on the theory and there's a list of NIBOSH itself. So use the one from NIBOSH itself. Did you all take a note of that? If you don't, you're gonna be using the wrong list, and you'll get it wrong. Right? The point I'm trying to say, I shouldn't even say it as a thing. If I say it, you may hear like a lot of people don't hear the part with not, do not, right? Like the way we talk in the workplace and like we say slip, trips, and falls. NIBOSH does not say slip, trips, and falls. So please do not use this list. It is a list. We talk like this in the companies, but that is not the NIBOSH list. It's just how we talk about hazards in the Caribbean and maybe around the world, but NIBOSH have their own list, right? So let's bridge into the project. I did mention it's about 3:45, right? Let's bridge into the project. I have them here. So one of the most important documents for the project, and again, if you have writing paper, please get the writing paper out, right? I'll tell you what to write. If you're not putting anything in the comments, if it's very important, just unmute your mic and tell me now, right? I am kind of engaged in teaching, so I wouldn't look at the chat too much anyway, right? If you think something is urgent, just unmute your mic and kind of come in a bit. I'll let you. Once I hear some background noise, I would ask if you'll have anything to add to it, right? All right. So can you all see this thing in the background? I'm trying to put our faces to the top. Can you all see this diagram or this document in the background? There's a forklift on it. Can you all see that? Okay. Well, you want to know something about this document? Well, two things, right? This is the guide to your project. So if you follow this, you cannot go wrong. Guidance for learners. It's the guide for your project. It actually tells you what to do, right? Let me see, I could probably get it a bit bigger on the screen, right? Because the writing is a bit small. Yeah. So this is the guide to your project. They actually tell you what they want and they actually have examples and stuff on it, right? Like here, like this here is an example. This thing in the box here, this NGG Limited is a medium-sized garage as an example of the introduction, right? So if you follow this, you would not go wrong. The only problem is people don't follow it. This is the list I was telling you about. Watch what it say, right? Watch what it says. They use some strong words now. You must find. Must is what they call an absolute duty. Means you cannot, like you don't have any flexibility. You must find and record at least 10 different hazards for the hazard table, right? They come and say, for the avoidance of doubt, because they know you go doubt. They know you go want to use the one on the slide or the textbook, right? For the avoidance of doubt, hazard categories are simplified. What is shown in this table here, table 1, look, table 1 here. And if you notice table 1, if you watch slips and trips, it didn't have the word fall with it. So you have to use it from here, slips and trips, right? Let me break it down for you further. If you don't understand what I'm talking about here, what I'm trying to tell you is that NEBOSH, they give you a list to choose your 10 hazards from, right? You are given a list to choose your 10 hazards from. You could choose any 10 from this list. Once you choose from this list, you'll be safe. So, can I use noise? Yes. Could I use vibration? If you have it in your company, maybe forklift or something. Could I use violence at work? Yes. Could I use substance abuse at work? Yes. Could I use hazardous substance chemical? You could use this one twice because it's hazardous substance chemical. For example, maybe there's a barrel of degreasers or something, or hand sanitizer. But if you have rat drop-ins, I'm not saying that you have, if you have like moles on fungus and rat drop-ins in a warehouse, you can say hazardous substance, biological. Could you use that? Yes. Could you use work-related driving? Could you use fire? Could you use electricity? Yes. Right? Let me ask you that question. Can we use projectiles?
No.
No. Right? You must. Yeah, you cannot, so projectors is a hazard, but it's not for this exam now. This project is like an exam that's going to the UK for marking, right? And so just make sure you're aware of that. I'm going to kind of stay silent for 30 seconds so you can watch the list a bit so that mentally, like the way I speak then, there's a lot of information coming at you. So I want your mind to kind of absorb it a bit, right? And then I'll continue. Take a deep breath.
So, but then number 7, right? From my experiences, number 7 is a leading cause in most areas.
But I suppose that's your experience anyway, right? Yeah.
That's
yeah.
my experience.
Yeah. So you have to choose 10 from here, but we might not reach there today because we are the introduction. I only came down to this table because I wanted it to show you the guidance have the table on it now to choose your hazards from, right? While you're looking at it, can somebody give 11 hazards? Yes. They say 10, at least 10. The word at least means more than. The word at least means more than. If you say, I am going to the supermarket with at least $100, probably means you have more than $100 on you, right? If you go into a taxi and the taxi says, I would leave if I get at least 3 passengers. If 4 people come, would the taxi driver still leave? Or would he turn away one person? He says he's going to leave
No,
with
he
4.
went to them away, so.
Yeah, because he said he's going to leave with at least 3. Say if I get 3, I go on. Well, those of us in Trinidad and Guyana, we understand those kind of local languages now, right? But if you with your family come and you have 4 people, but you hear him saying 1 to go, right? Which they always say, right? Yeah, but yeah, I mean, he will go with the 4. So could you put 11 hazards? Yes. Could you put 12? Yes. Do you get extra marks for it? No. Most people stop at 10. I just telling you now, but don't give them 9, right? So here what I want to do now, I want to talk to you a bit of this particular document, right? Just me and you alone in terms of what you need to do to pass, right? So I'm gonna grab a marker. I could probably write them right here for you all. Remember, I tell you today is an overview of the project. We'll probably study introduction by 4:15, right? But we'll never finish. I told you that, right? I told you that at the start. I told you last week as well. You're gonna get the overview of the project, right? So let's start writing. We're gonna start writing here. This is just about the project, right? So you don't need to go anywhere. The project could be done at home, right? But you have to base it on a company. So you could make up a company. You could make up a real company. So there's no need to get any special permission to go Proman, Atlantic LNG, Gisby, Exxon, Atlantic. There's doesn't need to get any special permission, right? You could make it up as based on a real company instead of probably saying, I would suggest make up a company, to be honest with you. I'll tell you why, because it's that easy. It could be real and it could be imagined, or it could be a mixture of both. It could be real, could be imagined, or it could be both, right? In fact, a lot of people having imagined a company actually do start a company, right? Imagination is very powerful. So you may think about a company, the idea would have been in your head all the time. Having done this project, you realize, wait, now I could have really started a company. I could have really started a business, right? So it could be imagined. Imagination is what becomes reality all the time, right? Tell me if you're okay with that. So you don't need any special permission. If you wonder why, it's because you get to the hazards I'm right here. You don't have to go to Proman to know then that a hazard could be hazardous substance chemical. You don't have to go to Atlantic LNG to know that fire could be a hazard. You could just make it up, right? And please, I'm going to say it again, make up something simple. If you want to know how simple, just make up something. So I've had people that use restaurants, small restaurants. I've had people say that, okay, they have started a small restaurant. I've had people that use roti shops. I've had people that use like a small garage, a fabricating garage, welding, fabricating. Don't use anything too big. Don't go and talk about Atlantic LNG and you don't know nothing about them. Just make it up. Just say, I'm going to use some name from here, right? Let's say we have Jessica Johnson, right? So just say JJ Enterprises Limited. That's it. That's all you need, right? So rest assured, and if you are making it up an SIS, whatever, you can still say that SIS, whatever, but there's no need to, right? You can make it up on something simple, whatever you like, right? Don't think you have to do a company. Think you understand that? A roti shop, a puri shop, a restaurant is not an industrial company, but NEBOSH will take it. Folks, you understand that a bit? You don't have to then go to Junior Sammy. Forget that. You're wasting time, right? The name is not important. The name is not important. I hope you take a note of that. And it's captured in my first point. It could be real or imagined. If you want, well, we have a sample, but if you want, I could show you some students one, but we can't do 2 then. We only have time for 1. to show you probably a student so next week or something, right? All right, next thing here, let me see what you need to do here again. So the other thing here is that I try to see how to break this news to you. It's bad news. Just now, I'm a general manager calling in class, so I don't think I'll answer. In class, right? But we're supposed to meet up this evening now, right? I think in class in half 4. I'm still trying to see how to break this news to you now. So here the thing, right? I don't know if you remember orientation day. The project does not have a pass mark. So it's not like 50 or 45. It doesn't have a pass mark. So the question is, well, how do you pass? Because if it doesn't have a pass mark, how do you pass? Well, here what they do. The project is like a big checklist. You'll see it just now, right? Well, you saw it before, but you probably didn't notice that nature of it. It's like a big checklist. So the question is, what is a checklist? A checklist have like a left-hand side and a right-hand side. The project is like a big checklist. It have like a left-hand side where they ask you for something. And then it have a right-hand side. You just have to go and do what they ask you for. So like the first thing they ask you for is the name of the company. Then they want how much workers you have. Then they want the location of the company, right? So you pass once you have what they ask for, right? Once you have what they ask for, right? You can put, let me see who I have again. Guyadina and Sons. So you put that here, Guyadina and Sons. Once you have it, what the examiners put, they put MET, M-E-T, MET, right? How much employees you have. If you put 20, they put MET. The project is a big checklist. Notice I said bigger, because it's going to take us about a couple of weeks to kind of get it over with, right? They will put MET, location of the company. You say, I'm thinking of something simple. Somebody give me a quick name first. A name that's simple. I'll just go with San Fernando. Right? So you say San Fernando, Trinidad and Tobago, they put MET. Right? If anybody's in Guyana here or Tobago and stuff, definitely you put your part of the world as well, right? And of course, if anybody's seen this on YouTube, because I told them my Google Classroom is kind of down, wherever you are at, you put your area, your town there, right? And so you pass like that. But the mama said it wasn't good news, right? Well, it is good news, but you have to work with me now. Some people don't do that, right? So like the moment you get a non-met or a not met, you will fail the project. I am not NEBOSH, I'm just telling you what it is. You don't get another chance. Well, I mean, you get another chance to write it over. But once you get one not met, they will fail you. So that is why following this guidance is very important. That is why following the sample is very important. And that's why following what we say here is also very important. Right? Personally, my humble view, remember, I'm not NEBOSH. I am a servant, just like you all. Right? In the pecking order, still is a servant. If NEBOSH say in the local parlance, do this, I have to do it. Right? But personally, I find the standard is too strict. Right? Like the other NEBOSH courses, remember we do a whole range of courses, right? There are other NEBOSH courses where you could get about 3 things wrong and still pass. There are other NEBOSH courses, you can get 10 questions wrong and still pass. Process safety is like that. You can get 15 questions wrong in process safety and still pass. But this is level 3, right? And so what may be of some comfort here, maybe, I hope you're writing, huh? And you understand why I say maybe, is because we do look at drafts. I do look at your drafts, right? However, don't overdo it, right? There are some people that they think as if it's like a personal concierge where you send me every time you make a changes. No, it's not like that. Right? We could probably look at one or two of your drafts. Like when I look at it, I'll do a full review of it now. Right? But I could look at piece. If you finish piece, I could look at that piece. You finish another piece, I could look at that. The problem I have, so why I put an asterisk there, not a number, is because there are some people that do not hand up a draft. Right?
Yeah.
There are some people that don't hand up a draft. So how could we have seen it? How could we have helped you? Today, I uploaded projects for a batch of students I had for the exam last week, right? Some of them I know did not hand up a draft, meaning what they hand up was the final. So I didn't vet it, but the day came for it to be handed up. So I had to hand it up, right? You understand where we come in here? It's like, if you're smart then and you're paying your money, do a draft and hand up a draft. We're here to help you. But just like that old story, there's a day coming then when the doors will be shut, when NIBOSH will actually have to get it. And it's very fast. It's like 2 weeks after, it's a week after the exam, right? We have to hand out projects. So if you hand up when it is due, then I cannot review it. Some people ask, some people beg. But remember, I work. And if you message me a draft 10, 11, I had somebody message one, I think the person in this class, I wonder. No, because you're not doing it. I think there's a fine line between respect and disrespect. Sorry, that's
Like
not
you
it.
gotta pick a side, you know.
Jesus Christ. Yeah,
I don't
like 1 a.m. in the morning, after 1 in the morning. I had to tell the students about that, right? And 1:21 a.m. in the morning, right? And I had a good mind not to look at any after that, right? Why? Why would you message a project 1:21 a.m. in the morning and ask for feedback 1:21 a.m. in the morning? Right? Now, I hope you're still writing. In a way, NIBOSH told us not to look at your drafts. But most schools do it. Right? We don't do it for you. We kind of give a feedback. Right? So don't feel as if I'm going to do it for you. I would just tell you, okay, look, you didn't meet this one here. And maybe you can look back at the guidance because you used the wrong hazard. That's what our feedback is like. I think we're allowed to do that, right? But we don't give a mark then. We don't say, okay, 100 of 100, whatever. Like we don't do that because we're not supposed to. Remember, I am not the examiner. There is the real examiner in the UK where your project is going, right? So keep this in mind. I didn't put this here. I put it as an asterisk because from this class here, in other words, then, I shouldn't say it like that. Let me not say it. Let me not say it, right? Let me just say that you are all good students. You are all going to hand up a draft on time. There's nobody in this class that's going to miss that date. There's nobody in this class going to do that. You're all going to be a different class and the class is gone by. I'll leave it at that. Prefer stay positive than what people normally do, right? Question for me, anybody? Question for me? Oh, it could be just seems like background noise. All right. Well, without any further ado, we have about 20 minutes. Let's have a look at the first partner, right? So the whole project is like that, not just 4 lines. This is just a snapshot I show here. I showed here, sorry, with what it is and what it should be, right? Let's have a look at the sample. So they also give you a sample. Let me just bring that up for you all. Right. Just now the marker has to change. Marker didn't change as yet. Okay. Marker still hasn't changed, so let me just do that again. Right. Tell me if you see the document change, you should have gone back to the yellow and sort of orange, yellow kind of thing, right? Did it change on your side as well?
Yes.
Okay, right. So just if you notice, this is part 2, but we have to do part 1. So that's the same, we could probably start part 1. Part 1 is very simple, right? It'll take us about, could you just give me a minute to answer the guy, right? Yeah, okay. Right. Thanks for that there. Yeah, that's my, I've like your students, I hope you all see what my day is like. I have students that get vexed at me because they say I don't answer their call. But whole day I am teaching in the night too, right? I have classes in the evening too. So why I'm telling you this is because you don't have to wait for Saturday then if you wanted to start your description here. But when you send something, just be patient with it now, right? You can message. And in today's day and age of everybody want feedback at the same time, if you have a doubt about anything, you message, right? Send a voice note, but give me time to respond to it at the same time, right? So you all heard that, right? You all have my number. Don't wait for next week, Saturday. Then to say, sir, I didn't really understand that last part there. Just take a picture of it and send me it in a voice note. I'll play it up for you. You don't have to wait. When you're doing this table and you have a doubt, just take a picture and send me, right? But again, I mean, that doesn't mean in the morning, that doesn't mean early in the morning anyway, right? Just give us a chance to respond to it anyway, right? But you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait to say that. You have to wait for a 4-man class to get an explanation, right? So see if you could notice but this is a fill out one. So you would have gotten a sheet two that was blank, like it had the left hand, but it had nothing on the right hand. It had the left hand. Let me bring it up a bit bigger again, right? You had the left hand side, but the right hand side would have been blank. So you have to fill it out. So the first part, you want the name of the organization. You put the name of an organization. If you can't think of one, just make up one, right? Stephen and Sons Company Limited. MML Mark Luchan Industries Limited. It doesn't really matter. I'll say that again. But I think I said it before, but you cannot understand how NIBOSH marking. In a way, then they're not marking you for being truthful. That if SL Enterprises is a real company, they're just marking to see that you fill it out. It's a checklist approach. Folks, you understand that? I'll say it again. They're not going to get on a flight to see if Atlantic LNG is really a real company, because they allow you to kind of make it up as well, right? So you can just sit home and just make it up. That's what I was saying, right? And part of your imagination is going to be based on reality, but some of it is still going to be real. If you say S&J fabrication, no, and even if you're making up the name S&J, it still is a real fabrication company. They do everything as a real fabrication company, right? Okay, site location, they have Leicestershire, UK. So you put your village, you put your town, right? Princestown, Trinidad and Tobago, West Indies, San Fernando, Victoria, Trinidad and Tobago, Point Fortin, South Trinidad, West Indies. Put it like that because remember going to somebody in England. You all understand that? Put Trinidad and Tobago with it, because if you put names like St. Charles Street or Piccadilly, because there's a Piccadilly in England. You put Prince of Wales Street, well, that's actually in England as well. You put Duke Street, there's a Duke Street in England as well. So just make sure like it's Duke Street, Trinidad and Tobago, Duke Street, Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, right? Put it like that, and you should be okay. There's no reason not to do it. Number of workers, any number of workers will do, but don't give them like very small numbers. Keep it somewhere in the 15 to 25. Right? You could just say 20, 10. I mean, that's a bit more. But don't keep it to be one then. Even if you have, like, let's say it's a family-owned garage, family-owned business, and you have 3 workers, you may have other people around. You may have part-time workers, whatever. You have 5, you have 6. You know, you could estimate it a bit and say about 10, right? Of course, the bigger companies, if you have hundreds of workers, still zone it back down to like a meaningful number around 20 anyway, right? So what I'm saying, there's no reason for you all not to do this week. But come Saturday, I will tell you all how much you will actually get it done. Right? All right, next thing. I'm going again, right? So the general description, what I'll do here, I wonder if you all could write it down. I would have just said it if you all could write it down. There are a couple of things inside here you have to put. What would you all do? Would you all write it down and save me the writing? I could just put the word here if you want, right? So the first thing you want to put is the size of the company. There are about 5 things inside here. There are about 5 things that they're looking for. Size of the company. I'm going a little bit faster. Next thing, function. Because it's already in the paragraph now. When you read it, you'll see it. Next thing is the function of the company. If it's a roti shop, are you catering for members of the public, special occasions, weddings, birthday parties, anniversaries, company events? That's function. If it's a school, what are y'all doing? If it is a fabrication shop, what are y'all doing? If it's a hairdressing salon, what are y'all doing? What's the function of the organization? Right? I'm going a bit fast, right? After function, we're going to go into activities. Now, activities are very important. The activities have to be fleshed out. I just put an act. The activities have to be fleshed out and separated with a comma. I don't know how to draw that. I'll just put a comma inside the bracket then, right? And I'm going to write out the word comma. So the more you could say, the better. Look at I have one here. Watch it. Typical activities undertaken include, the marker. Anyway, let me finish with the marker, because if I go there, I have to take off the marker and put back the marker. Let me write out all 5 one time, right? The size, function, activities. The other thing here is the working time of the company. The working times of the company. Should I probably just put time? I give myself more problems here, right? Working time or the work time of the company. And the last thing they want there is any shift system, right? Do you have a shift system? And please remember what I said, that this is a checklist. Now, if you want to know where I got these words from, it wasn't from my head. It was from the guidance. The same thing with the forklift, that's where I got these words from, right? So if you have all of these, they'll put met. They'll put met for here. Some people say, well, my company doesn't have a shift. I say, good. You still have to put a shift because it's a checklist. They ask you for a shift. You have to put a shift. Right? Let's read it out. In case of any doubts, anybody, in case you doubt, just go back to the guidance. Look it up here. Watch it here. I'm going to change the marker. The one with the forklift. If you wonder where I got those words from, watch it up here. They have it here in the guidance. Right? The general description of the organization must include products manufactured or services provided, the types of activities undertaken, and shift patterns worked. And shift patterns worked. And shift patterns work, not or. And this is what the accent here for. You all understand what I meant by that? If you don't understand, I'll say it another way. I hope I'm not disrespectful to anybody. Right? But again, if anybody is listening to this on YouTube, whatever, this is sometimes how locals understand certain things. Now, it's not, I'm not going to use any bad words. It's just a slang, right? So like the slang we say in the Caribbean here is when they say jump, jump. I think they say that around the world too. When they say jump, jump. So don't say, I don't have a shift. Make up a shift to the accent you for it. Right? I had a student, this is not a joke, I had a student that actually failed. Because, and I told her that, I said, look, the accent you for a shift. She said, no, my company doesn't have a shift. When she failed, she put shift though. when you fail, you have a chance to submit back the same project with the points that you didn't meet there. They will highlight it and tell you, look, you didn't put it. And that's what they told her. They told her she didn't put a shift. And I say, if you check back my comments, that's what I'll tell you. But you saying your company doesn't have a shift. I told you the project is not totally real. You can imagine it, right? Okay, folks, I'm gonna read this because we're almost finished, right? I'm gonna read, see if you can see those things I mentioned here. I may have to reduce the size of it because I put it bigger for anybody who was reading on a phone or whatever, right? So I guess there's a magnification there. So NGG Limited is a medium-sized garage with offices, vehicle repair shops, and a paint spray booth. So you typically should highlight 3 areas. And if you want to write that down too, so it's supposed to mention at these 3 areas in your description. Office, vehicle repair shop, spray paint booth. If you're using a roti shop, you could still say office, kitchen, service area. Using a fabrication shop, office, warehouse, storage racking area. Everything could come back to 3. Using the bank, you probably could say, well, where the tellers are at, the offices in the back, well, if you have room for the bank tellers. Right? Okay, let's see function. The business does a lot of repairs and maintenance on commercial vehicles and body repairs on vehicles, mainly cars and vans that have been involved in accidents for insurance companies. Servicing and maintenance are also carried out from members of the public. So that's function. So you would say Ram's Roti Shop is a small family-owned businesses with offices, one office, kitchen area, pantry, and serving area. The business, caters some members of the public, ready-made meals, served from maybe 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Involves various types of curries and stews. The UK people love things like that. We also cater for members of the public, for special occasions, weddings, anniversaries, birthday parties, whatever have you, full stop. That's it. It's not hard, but it'll take you some time, right? Okay, next thing is activities. Typical activities undertaken, include moving parts from the stores to the workshop, engine repairs, activities related to servicing and maintenance, body repair, draining fuel oil, spray booth activities, including the use of paints that are solvent-based. So you're painting a picture then for the UK examiner to understand what it is you're doing. So you flesh it out by various commas. What y'all think?
Question, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like how you divided the company into like 3 parts, like with the office, vehicle, repair shop, and paint. If it exceeds that, will it be a problem?
You can go to 4, but there's no need to probably do more than 3, right? You can go to 5 if you want, but don't overdo it. In other words, then zone down. So, like if you're using a big company, zone it down. If you're really using Atlantic LNG, you're really using Proman, you're really using SAS, zone it down still to a part of the company. You can at least zone it down, right? So if you're using part of SAS, you can say the office area where training is done. You say the pipe racking area and maybe the welfare room. Zone it down. Zone it down to 3, even if you have more than 3, right? The reason is that if you want to know why, it's only 10 hazards you have to get, not 20. Not 30, only 10. 3 areas is more than enough to get 10 hazards, right? So that's why you could keep it down to 3, all right? All right, the garage, next thing is time, working time. The garage operates from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays and is closed on the weekends. That's working time shift. Now, I don't agree to this. I'm going to I don't have a marker. So I tell people not to do this. Don't do this. Just make up a shift. Right? And I'm not telling you that for joke, right? Just make up a shift now. Just say, okay, at S&J, workers work on a shift system on a Saturday from 8:30 a.m. to 11, maybe 12. So 8:30 a.m. to 12 p.m., right? On a shift system. And that's it, full stop. Don't do this madness here. You know why? You would know why, yeah? I'll tell you why. A lot of people don't listen. They take this, and when NIBOSH see this, NIBOSH hold them for plagiarism. Because if you take the same line, a lot of people say the same thing. They are staggered start and finish time and place. Don't do that. because you're taking this is a project, right? And if you take lines, then that is plagiarism, right? Up to this week, I got one. NIBA sent back a report. They say they failed a student because they felt his project contained a high number of work similar to the sample, right? So just make up your own shift. Just say, Ram's Roti Shop. Roti Shop does have shift? I don't know. Okay. So Ram's Roti Shop will open for special occasions like, public holidays, Diwali, for half day on a shift system from 7 to T, whatever, to 10 to T. Just make it up, right? Forget teeth-in lines from the sample. There are many examples I could give where people did that and they got caught, right? Oh, we almost finished. I'm going to just wrap this up and we wrap up part 1 here. So the next thing you want to do is that you want to put, sorry, I take up all of these colors and stuff, right? Anyway, I mightn't have time. So you want to put a general, oh, geez, I take the wrong zoom, right? We have to get rid of the marker, we have to get rid back of the eraser to kind of move the cursor on it, right? So you want to put a description of the area to be included in the risk assessment. So listen to this one carefully. We almost finished. If you listen, we'll go faster, right? It's not really a description they want. What they want is a list. They just wanted to list all the areas that they're using for the risk assessment out of the 3, right? Watch it, description of the area, but when you read it, it says the risk assessment will cover the garage and spray boot activities. The office has a separate risk assessment. My advice is not to do that. My advice is just to use all 3 areas all together. Just the risk assessment will cover the office of Ram's Roti Shop, the kitchen area, and the serving area. Don't make life difficult. Just the same 3 areas that you take, just put back those same 3 areas. I will be commenting that on your draft. If anybody say the office has a separate risk assessment, that is plagiarism too, because it sounds just like the sample. Right? Okay, last one, any other relevant information? Well, the truth is the guidance. I saw somebody put on this. Somebody put something I didn't say to put. And when I asked them why, they said, this thing here said any other relevant information. I say true, but didn't you read the guidance? They actually tell you what they want here, The guidance actually say what they want under any other relevant information. The guidance actually say what to put. They didn't say talk about anything else in the company or anything you want to talk about. They actually tell you what they want here. And what they want here, if you want to take it down, they wanted to say here, who has direct responsibility for health and safety. I don't have time to go back to the guidance to show you, but you could open it and you'll see, right? So under any other relevant information, they want you to say who has the responsibility for health and safety. So you can say, just make it up, you can say Mr. John Henry, the production manager, has overall responsibility for health and safety. You can say the CEO of the company, if it's a small company, has direct responsibility for health and safety. You can say the owner of the roti shop functions as the HSE manager, and therefore he has the direct responsibility for health and safety. Don't make it difficult. And next thing people just get catch is they put the finance director. Why you putting a finance director in a roti shop? You think a roti shop really have a finance director? Right? Probably the wife. No offense there. Probably the wives are the financial directors. But the thing is, don't take the line finance director, right? Just make it up now. Just say, Mr. James, the supervisor, who reports to the HSE manager, has direct responsibility for health and safety, or is responsible for health and safety. And that's it. Part 1 is finished. What do you all think? Look back at it now. In retrospect, how easy it was. You put the name of the company that you can make up. You put a location. You put the number of workers. The passage, they had about 5 things. The size of the company. I did mention the 3 areas, function, activities, working time, and shift. The rest of it, description is just to say where you use it. It wasn't really a description. And the last thing was who has the responsibility for health and safety. That's why nobody should fail because it's too easy.
Easy.
Yeah, go ahead.
I noticed that our word limit too. So you have to stay in that.
No, not really. No, they don't fail you for the word limit. So you can cross the word limit. Feel
Okay.
free to cross the word limit. Feel free to write less than the word limit too. But if you write yours just like that, you would meet up the word limit. They don't really do nothing for the word limit. Thank God for that. There's no penalty for crossing the word limit. There's no penalty for writing less than the word limit. Just forget that. Most people don't even take on that part of the project, right? But you feel though, if you, for example, like you left out activities, or you left out the shift, or you left out the time, or you didn't say who was responsible, you wrote everything else about the company, right? You know, which that just proves that people are not reading the guidance, right? So I'm gonna finish here. I'm gonna wrap up by saying, not to use the guidance is like going somewhere without a roadmap. So please use the guidance, right? All right. I'm gonna go straight in the road because I'm late actually for a meeting, but in Port of Spain. So geez, right? So I mean that's what the general manager is calling for, right? Megan George.
So one question as you call in rule, right?
Sure.
If you're doing a shift, right, you have to state how much workers on the shift or just leave it open.
You could probably, the more precise you could be, the better. Like the more real you could be, the better, right? So like if it just okay that there is a night shift in which you have 20 workers, like that's even better. The more you could come out of the sample, the better. Like they don't like to see the sample all the time. Remember, 100 of people doing the
Okay.
sample around the world. For everybody write back the same thing. It kind of looks boring to them now. It kind of looks as if you're just making it up. But the more real you could be, the better it is for you.
Okay.
Okay, Megan George. Please remember to, I have full recordings of this on YouTube already. You don't have to wait to say, look, I'm waiting for the recording. It have tons. Just go Shadrach Safety Institute, but project part 1. It's still me. I look younger, but it was still me some years ago, right? Right? Mark Lochan.
Present.
Yeah, no, Mark is here. Michael is here. Rishi. Kenwin Payne. Okay, good. Aaron Caesar.
Present.
Thanks, Aaron. Joshua Ram. Of course, guys, enjoy the rest of the evening. Yeah. Afraz.
Yeah, present.
Very much. Sumaria St. Clair.
Present.
Very much. Javan Burke.
Present, sir.
Okay, thanks, Javan. Stephen Charan.
Present, sir.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Shannon Mason.
Present, sir.
Thanks, Shannon. Evangeline.
Present, sir.
Thanks, Evangeline. Whitney George. I don't like this thing too much, just to let you all know.
Present, sir. Afternoon.
Okay. Whitney George. Right. Akili Wilson. Seen you on screen, right, Akili? Jessica Johnson.
Present.
Thanks, Jessica. Shamila Rajas. Shamila Rajas. Sean Hanif. Osmond Philip.
Present.
Thanks, Osmond.
Nice. Enjoy.
Danishwari
Present.
and Ria, right?
Yeah, here.
Yes. Okay, folks. Do enjoy the rest of your Saturday. I'm on the road again till about maybe 10 o'clock tonight, right? When I come back down south anyway. Right? All the best, everyone. See you all back next week, Saturday.